The morning sky over planet Zeri glowed with soft purple light as Amy Taylor adjusted her environmental suit. Amy had been on this alien world for only 3 months as part of the Earth Alliance research team. Her job was to study the unique plant life that grew in the blue forests surrounding the Makari settlements. The Makari were peaceful beings with silver fur covering their slender bodies and large, expressive eyes that seemed to change color with their moods. They had welcomed the human researchers with curiosity and kindness. Amy had quickly grown fond of them, especially the cubs who followed her around whenever she visited their villages. That morning, Amy was working with Kira, a Makari botanist, collecting samples from a new flowering plant they had discovered near the edge of the forest. Kira was explaining how the plant was used in Makari medicine when the first explosion shook the ground. "What was that?" Amy asked. Looking up at the sky, Kira's eyes turned a deep, red color of fear. "It comes from above," the alien said in her musical voice. Before Amy could respond, more explosions followed. The peaceful morning erupted into chaos as massive ships appeared in the purple sky, dropping objects that exploded on impact. Amy watched in horror as the beautiful forest began to burn, blue flames spreading rapidly through the trees. "We must return to the research base," Amy said, grabbing her sample bag. The base had communications equipment they could call for help. Kira nodded and they began running through the forest. The sounds of destruction grew louder behind them. Amy could hear the terrified cries of Makari in the distance. Her heart raced, not just from running but from fear for the gentle aliens who had become her friends. They were halfway to the research base when a massive explosion threw them both to the ground. Amy hit her head on a rock, stars dancing in her vision. When she could see clearly again, Kira was gone. "Kira," she called, her voice muffled. By her helmet, only silence answered. Amy pushed herself to her feet. The environmental suit had protected her from serious injury, but her communications system was damaged. She could no longer contact the base or other team members. She was alone. In the distance she could see strange mechanical shapes moving through the burning forest. Tall walking machines with multiple legs and weapon systems mounted on top. They moved with terrible purpose, crushing everything in their path. Amy had never seen anything like them before. She needed to hide. The machines were between her and the research base, cutting off her escape route. Amy moved deeper into the forest, away from the path of destruction. The blue leaves provided some cover as she crept through the underbrush, trying to make sense of what was happening. This was an invasion. There had been rumors of an aggressive species called the Drakari expanding their territory in this sector of space, but the Earth Alliance had dismissed the reports. The peaceful Makari had no defenses, no weapons to fight back. They were being slaughtered. Amy reached the edge of a Makari village, or what remained of it. Buildings made of woven plant fibers lay smoldering on the ground. Bodies of silver, furred aliens scattered among the ruins. She felt sick with grief and anger. What kind of beings would attack such peaceful creatures? Sound caught her attention, a soft whimpering coming from beneath a fallen structure. Amy approached cautiously, peering into the shadows. Her heart stopped at what she saw. 5 small Makari cubs huddled together, their silver fur covered in blue dust from the destroyed buildings, their large eyes wide with fear as they spotted her. Amy recognized one of them, Elra, the smallest cub who often followed her around during her visits to the village, asking endless questions about Earth. Amy knelt down, removing her helmet so the cubs could see her face. "It me," she said softly. Holding out her hand, Elra recognized her, the cub's eyes shifting from fearful red to a cautious yellow. The little one chittered something to the others. The oldest cub, a female named Sira, responded in broken English. "Human Amy," she said. "Why machines hurt us?" Amy shook her head. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I will help you." A thunderous crash nearby made them all freeze. A war machine was approaching, its metal legs crushing everything in its path. Amy looked at the cubs, then at her environmental suit. An idea formed in her mind. "Come with me," she whispered. The cubs followed her deeper into the ruins, away from the approaching machine. Amy needed to think. They had to find shelter somewhere safe. But the machines were everywhere. Their sensors would detect movement, especially in Open areas. The research facility Amy remembered. There was an underground laboratory about a mile away designed for hazardous experiments. The walls were thick, the doors reinforced. It might withstand the attack, but getting there would be dangerous. They would have to cross open ground. The war machines would see them immediately unless. Amy looked down at her environmental suit. It was designed to protect humans from alien environments. The outer shell was made of special materials that blocked radiation and masked heat signatures. It might hide them from the machine sensors, little ones, she said, crouching down to eye level with the cubs. We need to go to the laboratory, but the machines will see us unless we hide. The cubs stared at her, not understanding. Amy opened the outer layer of her environmental suit, creating a space between the protective shell and her inner clothing. You need to hide in here, she explained, pointing to the space. I will carry you. The machines won't see you. Inside my suit. The cubs looked uncertain, their eyes shifting between orange confusion and red fear. Elra was the first to understand. She approached Amy, her little paws reaching up. Amy gently lifted the small cub and tucked her into the suit, making sure there was room to breathe. The others watched hesitantly. Sira, the oldest, stepped forward next, then the others followed one by one. Amy carefully positioned each cub inside her environmental suit. The added weight made movement difficult, but it was their only chance. The outer layer of the suit would mask their heat signatures and block scans. Amy sealed her suit, checking that all 5 cubs had enough space to breathe. Then she put her helmet back on. The display inside was cracked, but still functional, showing her the safest path forward. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This was not what she had trained for. As a botanist, her days were spent studying plants, not running from war machines. But these cubs needed her. Their lives depended on her courage. Amy started walking, each step carefully planned. The weight of the cubs made her movements awkward, but she pushed forward. Ahead lay open ground, where the forest had been burned away. Several war machines patrolled the area, their sensors sweeping back and forth. Inside her suit, the cubs pressed close to her body, trembling with fear. Amy whispered words of comfort, though she wasn't sure they could hear her through the suit's inner layer. She approached, the edge of the forest gathering her courage. The first step into the open felt like stepping off a cliff. Amy moved slowly, deliberately trying not to attract attention. A war machine turned in her direction, its sensor array glowing with red light. Amy froze, her heart pounding inside her chest. The cubs sensed her fear growing still within the suit. The machine paused, its sensors sweeping over her. Then it turned away, continuing its patrol. Amy released the breath she had been holding. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. There were more machines ahead and a long way to go. Amy continued her journey across the scarred landscape. Each step was agony, the weight of the cubs and her own fear draining her strength. But she refused. To stop, their lives were in her hands and she would not let them down. The path to the laboratory stretched before her. A dangerous journey through a war zone with 5 frightened cubs hidden inside her suit. Amy set her jaw with determination. They would make it. They had to. In the distance, the war machines continued their destruction of the once beautiful world. The sky darkened with smoke as more ships arrived, bringing more invaders. The peaceful life of the Makari was ending, replaced by violence and fear. But inside Amy's environmental suit, 5 small lives continued. 5 hearts beat with hope. 5 futures remained possible, as long as the human protected them. Amy moved across the burned landscape with agonizing slowness. Each step was careful and measured. The 5 Makari cubs hidden inside her environmental suit made movement difficult, but she pressed forward. Their soft bodies pressed against her as they clung to her inner clothing. The war machines patrolled nearby, their massive metal legs crushing anything in their path. Amy could see their sensor arrays sweeping the area looking for survivors. Her environmental suit was her only advantage. The special materials blocked heat signatures and confounded scans. As long as she moved carefully, the machines might ignore her. One of the cubs shifted position inside the suit, causing Amy to stumble. She caught herself quickly freezing in place. As a machine turned toward her, the sensor array glowed red as it scanned the area. Amy held her breath, not daring to move. The cubs sensed her fear and grew still. After what felt like eternity, the machine turned away, continuing its patrol. Amy released, her breath, her legs shaking with relief and exhaustion. She had to keep moving. The underground laboratory was still half a mile away. Inside her helmet, Amy watched the environmental readings. The air quality was deteriorating as fires spread through. The forest toxic smoke filled the sky, making it harder to see. The suit's filters were working overtime to keep her breathing clean air, but the cubs had no protection beyond her suit. She needed to move faster. A sound caught her attention. Human voices. Amy turned carefully, looking for the source. Through the smoke, she could see a group of Earth Alliance researchers running toward the main base. They were being pursued by a war machine. Amy wanted to call out to warn them, but the communications in her helmet were damaged. She could only watch in horror as the machine caught up to the fleeing humans. Energy weapons fired. The researchers fell one by one, until none remained standing. Grief and anger filled Amy, but she forced herself to turn away. There was nothing she could do for her colleagues now. Her priority had to be the cubs. 5 innocent lives depended on her reaching the laboratory. Amy continued her journey, keeping low when possible, using burning wreckage as cover. The weight of the cubs grew heavier with each step. Her muscles burned with the effort, but she refused to rest. Stopping meant death. Inside her suit, one of the cubs began to make distressed sounds. Amy recognized Elra's voice. The smallest cub was frightened. By the sounds of destruction around them, Amy whispered soothing words, hoping the little one could hear her. "It's okay, little one," she said. "We will be safe soon." The cub seemed to understand, growing quieter. Amy smiled despite the situation. These aliens were remarkable, so intelligent and sensitive. She would not let them down. The path to the laboratory took Amy past a Makari defense line, where adult aliens were making a stand against the invaders. Their primitive weapons were no match for the war machines, but they fought bravely. Amy wondered if the parents of the cubs were among them. A massive explosion rocked the ground, throwing Amy forward. She managed to curl her body, protecting the cubs as she fell. Her suit absorbed most of the impact, but pain shot through her shoulder. She had landed hard on the left side. Amy pushed herself up, checking that the cubs were unharmed inside her suit. They chittered with concern, feeling her pain through their connection. 5 pairs of eyes looked at her through the inner layer of the suit, their colors shifting between worry and fear. "Okay," she assured them, "we keep going." The laboratory was visible now, a low concrete structure built into the side of a hill. Its reinforced walls and doors were designed to contain hazardous experiments. It might withstand the attack if they could reach it. Amy approached carefully. The area around the laboratory was open ground with no cover. 3 war machines stood between her and safety. There was no way to sneak past them. She would have to risk a direct approach and hope her suit masked the presence of the cubs. Taking a deep breath, Amy walked forward, keeping her pace steady and deliberate. She moved as if she belonged there, as if she were just another piece of debris caught in the wind. The machines continued their patrol, seemingly unaware of her presence. 20 yards from the laboratory entrance, a sensor swept over Amy. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The cubs pressed closer to her body, sensing danger. One of the machines turned toward her, its weapon systems powering up. Amy prepared to run, though she knew it was hopeless. With the weight of the cubs, she could never outrun the machine. The weapons locked onto her position. Amy closed her eyes, waiting for the end. A sudden explosion from the forest drew the machine's attention away. Makari fighters had set charges, creating a diversion. The machines turned toward the new threat, their programming prioritizing the larger group over a single target. Amy seized the opportunity, running the last distance to the laboratory door. Her legs burned with the effort, the cubs bouncing inside her suit. She reached the heavy metal door, yanking on the handle. It didn't budge. The door was locked, requiring a keycard for entry. Amy's keycard was back at the main base. She had no way to get inside. Panic threatened to overwhelm her as she looked back at the war machines. The diversion would not last long. Amy examined the door, looking for another way in. There had to be something. She noticed a ventilation shaft near ground level, small but maybe just large enough. The cover was secured with screws, but the metal was thin. Amy picked up a rock and began hammering. At the corner of the cover, the metal bent under her assault. Finally, the cover broke free, revealing a dark shaft leading into the facility. Amy looked inside. It would be a tight fit, but possible. Amy knelt down and began to open her suit. She released the cubs one by one. The small aliens blinked in the dim light, disoriented but quiet. Amy pointed to the ventilation shaft. "You go first," she explained. "I come after you, Sierra." The oldest cub understood immediately. Her flexible body was perfect for such spaces. She entered the shaft, disappearing into the darkness. The others followed one by one. Amy helped Elra, the smallest, into the shaft before taking one last look around. The war machines had finished with the diversion and were turning back toward the laboratory. Amy squeezed into the shaft, her environmental suit scraping against the metal sides. It was painfully tight, but she managed to pull herself through. The cubs had gone ahead, following the shaft deeper into the facility. Amy crawled after them, ignoring the pain in her injured shoulder. The shaft widened as they moved deeper into the laboratory. Amy could see a soft blue light ahead. Emergency power was still running. She followed the light, the cubs moving ahead of her with greater eyes. Soon they reached a grate opening into a room below. Sierra pushed at the grate. It gave way, falling to the floor with a clatter. The cubs dropped down into the room. Amy followed, forcing her larger human body through the opening. She fell awkwardly, landing hard on the laboratory floor. Amy lay there for a moment, catching her breath. The cubs gathered around her, their soft paws touching her face with concern. She smiled at them reassuringly. Though every muscle in her body screamed with pain, she had done it. They were inside the laboratory, safe from the machines, at least for now. The room was a storage area filled with equipment and supplies. Amy pushed herself to her feet, examining their shelter. The walls were thick, reinforced concrete, designed to contain explosions. The door was sealed with no windows. The ventilation system was self-contained. There was no way for the machines to detect them here. Amy removed her damaged helmet, letting it fall to the floor. Her environmental suit was torn and dented from the journey. The outer shell had protected them, but was now beyond repair. She began to remove the suit, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured shoulder. The cubs watched her with curious eyes. Their silver fur was matted with sweat from being inside the hot suit for so long, but they seemed otherwise unharmed. Amy felt a surge of relief. They had survived the first part of their ordeal. Amy checked the supplies in the storage room, finding emergency rations and water. She offered some to the cubs, who sniffed at the strange human food before cautiously eating. The smallest cub, Elra, stayed close to Amy, refusing to leave her side. The little one seemed to have bonded with her human protector. After eating, Amy explored the laboratory, looking for communications equipment. She found a radio system in the main lab, but it was dead. The power was limited to emergency systems only. There was no way to call for help. They were trapped here until rescue came, or until the invasion ended. Amy returned to the cubs, who had settled in a corner, making a nest of sorts from soft materials they found. She sat down beside them, exhaustion washing over her. The events of the day played through her mind. The peaceful morning shattered by invasion, the destruction of the Makari villages, the deaths of her human colleagues. Elra crawled into her lap, looking up at her with large, trusting eyes. The little cub made a soft purring sound that seemed to express gratitude. Amy stroked the silver fur, gently, feeling a fierce protective instinct she had never experienced before. These cubs were her responsibility now. She would keep them safe no matter what. Outside, the war continued. The sounds of destruction, muffled by thick walls but still audible. Amy wondered how long they would have to hide here. Hours, days. The Earth Alliance would send help eventually. But how long would it take for them to respond to the invasion? For now, they were safe. The laboratory would protect them from the machines, but food and water were limited. They could not stay here forever. Eventually, they would have to find other survivors, Amy. Amy woke to the sound of scratching. She opened her eyes quickly, alert for danger. The 5 Makari cubs were still curled around her, their silver fur rising and falling with each breath. The scratching came from somewhere else. Amy gently moved the cubs, placing them on the soft nest they had made. She stood up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Her injured shoulder throbbed with pain, but she ignored it, moving toward the sound. The scratching was coming from the ventilation shaft they had used to enter the laboratory. Someone or something was trying to get in. Amy looked around for a weapon, finding a heavy metal rod among the laboratory equipment. She positioned herself in front of the sleeping cubs, ready to defend them. The grate over the ventilation shaft moved, pushed from inside. Amy raised her makeshift weapon, her heart pounding. A silver-furred head emerged from the opening. Amy nearly collapsed with relief. It was a Makari adult. The alien squeezed through the opening, dropping lightly to the floor. Its large eyes widened at the sight of Amy, then shifted to a bright yellow color of joy when it spotted the cubs behind her. "Me children," the Makari said in broken English, the voice identifying her as female. The cubs woke at the sound, running to the adult with happy cries. Only 2 of them, though Amy noticed Sira and another cub named Tali. The other 3 remained behind, looking confused. The Makari female embraced her children, covering them with affectionate licks. Amy lowered her weapon. The mother looked up at her, eyes shifting to a deep blue color that Amy had learned indicated gratitude. "Human, save my children," she said. "You have heart of warrior." Amy shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do." The Makari approached Amy, placing a paw on her injured shoulder. The touch gentle. Amy winced but allowed the contact. "You hurt," the alien observed. "It's nothing," Amy said, "just a bruise." "Where are the other parents?" The Makari female's eyes darkened. "Many gone," she said, "fighting machines, others hiding in deep caves beyond mountains." The 3 remaining cubs moved closer to Amy, seeking comfort. She placed her hand on Elra's head, the smallest cub purring at her touch. These cubs had lost their parents to the invasion. Their lives would never be the same. The Makari female introduced herself as Nira. She explained that she had been separated from her mate during the first attack. He had gone to fight while she sought shelter. When the machines moved on, she had begun searching for her children, following their scent to the laboratory. Nira had news. The invasion was not just happening here. The Drakari had attacked multiple Makari settlements across the planet. It was a full-scale invasion aimed at claiming the resource-rich world for themselves. The Makari were fighting back, but their primitive weapons were no match for the war machine. "Some of your kind fight with us," Nira said, eyes brightening. "Survivors from Skybase join with Makari warriors." Amy felt a surge of hope. Other humans had survived. The Earth Alliance research team had established a main base and several smaller outposts across the planet. If some of her colleagues were alive, they might be organizing a resistance due. If the communications array is still working," Amy asked. The base had equipment powerful enough to send a distress signal to Earth Alliance headquarters. Nira shook her head, not knowing machines destroy tall metal things. "First," she said, "that made sense. The Drakari would target communications equipment, preventing the Makari and humans from calling for help. They wanted to complete their invasion before the Earth Alliance could respond." Amy considered their options. The laboratory was safe for now, but they couldn't stay here indefinitely. The food and water would run out eventually. They needed to find other survivors, join the resistance. "We need to leave," she told Nira. "Find others." The Makari female looked uncertain, eyes shifting. "To a worried orange-color machine still hunt," she said. Many outside. Amy understood the risk, but staying meant slow starvation. They had to take the chance. "Where are the other survivors?" she asked. "Nira Mountains," Nira replied. "Many days' walk from here. Makari no secret paths, machines too big to follow. A journey through the mountains would be difficult, especially with cubs. But it might be their only hope of reaching safety." Amy began gathering supplies, packing emergency rations and water containers into a bag. She found medical supplies, treating her shoulder as best she could. Nira watched her working, then spoke again. "Some of your kind hide in metal home not far from here," she said. "Maybe one day walk." Amy stopped her preparations. A human outpost nearby. That would be better than attempting the mountain journey. The outpost might have communications equipment or weapons. They could call for help, or at least find transportation. Where Amy asked, showing Nira a digital map of the area, the Makari pointed to a location about 15 miles northeast. A small research station established to study the unique geology of that region. Amy had visited it once during her first month on Zeri. It was built like a bunker, partially underground, with reinforced walls. That would be better. Amy said we go there first. They prepared to leave. The cubs were afraid of going outside again, but understood the necessity. Nira would carry her 2 children, Amy would take the other 3. The ventilation shaft was there, only way out. The main doors were sealed by the emergency lockdown. Amy went first, crawling through the tight space with difficulty. Her shoulder protested the movement, but she pushed through. The 3 orphaned cubs followed, staying close behind. Her Nira came last, carrying her children. The shaft emerged outside behind a pile of debris, providing some cover from view. Amy peered out cautiously. The war machines were still present, but fewer in number. Most had moved on to other areas, leaving only a pair to patrol the destroyed settlement. Amy studied the machines, looking for patterns in their movement. They seemed to follow set paths, stopping at regular intervals to scan the area. If she timed it right, they could slip past between scans. She explained the plan to Nira. They would move from cover to cover, heading northeast toward the human outpost. The journey would take at least a day, maybe more depending on how often they had to hide. The cubs were frightened, but brave. Elra, the smallest, held Amy's hand, her large eyes full of trust. The orphaned cubs stayed close to Amy while Nira's children clung to their mother. The group prepared to leave their shelter. Amy checked her digital map one last time, memorizing the route. Then she took a deep breath and led them out into the open. The morning air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see far ahead, but also providing some concealment. They moved quickly from the laboratory to the cover of a destroyed building. Amy counted the seconds between the machine scans. 30 seconds. That was their window to move between hiding spots. The group settled into a rhythm. Move, hide, wait, move again. The cubs were surprisingly quiet, understanding the need for silence. Elra never let go of Amy's hand, even when they had to crawl through tight spaces. By midday, they had covered several miles. The landscape was devastated. What had once been beautiful blue forest, now burned and broken. The Makari villages were gone, reduced to ash, and debris bodies lay where they had fallen, both alien and human. Amy tried to shield the cubs from the worst sights, but it was impossible to hide the reality of war from them. They stopped to rest in the shelter of a rock formation. Amy shared the rations with the group. The cubs ate quickly, their energy depleted from the constant stress and movement. Nira seemed tireless, her determination to protect her children giving her strength as they prepared to continue their journey. Amy heard a sound that made her blood freeze. The heavy metallic footsteps of a war machine approaching their position. She signaled for silence, the group pressing themselves against the rocks. The machine passed within feet of their hiding place, its sensors sweeping. Back and forth, Amy held Elra close, feeling the cub's heart racing against her chest. The other cubs huddled with Nira, all of them frozen with fear. The machine paused directly in front of their hiding place. Its sensor array glowed red as it scanned the area. Amy closed her eyes, certain they had been discovered. Then something unexpected happened. A distant explosion drew the machine's attention. It turned away from their position, moving toward the sound. Amy released the breath she had been holding. Relief flooded through her. They had been lucky this time. The group continued their journey, moving with greater caution now. The war machines seemed more numerous in this area. Amy realized they were approaching another settlement. The machines were concentrated around populated areas, hunting for survivors. They would have to go around, adding miles to their journey, but Amy saw no alternative. Trying to pass through an area patrolled by multiple machines would be suicide. She explained the change of plans to Nira. The Makari agreed without hesitation, trusting Amy's judgment. The detour took them through what remained of the blue forest. The trees were burned, their once vibrant color, now gray ash. The ground was littered with dead wildlife, creatures that had been unable to escape the fires. The cubs whimpered at the devastation of their world. The sun was setting by the time they reached the edge of the forest. Amy checked her map. They were still at least 10 miles from the human outpost. Too far to reach before dark, they would have to find shelter for the night. Nira discovered a small cave half hidden by fallen trees. It would be tight for all of them, but it offered protection from the elements and from the machine sensors. Amy checked it carefully, finding it empty of other creatures. Morning came with no relief from the nightmare. The sky remained dark, filled with smoke and ash. Amy woke the cubs and Nira. They ate a small portion of their dwindling supplies before continuing their journey. The human outpost was still miles away, across dangerous territory. They moved carefully through the ruined landscape. The war machines were less numerous here, but still present. Amy led the group, staying low, using the burned trees and debris as cover. The cubs were quiet, understanding the need for silence, even little Elra, who normally chattered constantly. By midday, they had covered several more miles. The terrain became rockier as they approached the foothills where the human outpost was located. The higher ground gave Amy a view of the destruction behind them. What had once been beautiful Makari settlements and blue forests was now a blackened wasteland. Amy checked her map again. The outpost should be just beyond the next ridge. She motioned for the group to follow as she climbed carefully up the rocky slope. The cubs were agile, their clawed feet finding easy purchase on the rocks. Nira helped the smaller ones while Amy carried Elra on her back at the top of the ridge. Amy dropped to her stomach, peering over the edge. What she saw made her heart sink. The human outpost was there, but it was surrounded by war machines, at least 5 of them patrolling the perimeter. The reinforced structure still stood, but there was no sign of movement, no indication that anyone survived inside. We can't go there, Amy whispered to Nira. Too many machines. Nira nodded, her eyes shifting to a worried orange color. What now, she asked. Amy considered their options. The mountain path to the Makari caves was their only alternative, but that journey would take days through difficult terrain with limited supplies. The cubs were already tired and hungry. They needed help soon. A sound from below caught their attention. Amy flattened herself against the rocks, pulling Elra close. The other cubs froze in place, their silver fur blending with the stone. Nira did the same, holding her children tightly. A patrol of Drakari soldiers moved along the base of the ridge. These were not machines, but the invaders themselves. The first, Amy had seen, they were tall, nearly 7 feet, with armored exoskeletons covering reptilian bodies. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing red visors. The patrol passed without spotting them, moving toward the outpost. Amy released her breath. Looking down at the cubs, she saw fear in their large eyes. They had seen the beings responsible for destroying their world. Amy made a decision. We go to mountains, she told Nira. There is no other way. They retreated from the ridge, moving north, toward the mountain paths Nira knew. The journey would be difficult, but they had no choice. The outpost was lost to them. They had traveled less than a mile when Amy heard a sound that made her freeze. The whine of engines overhead. She looked up to see a small craft moving fast across the sky. It wasn't a Drakari design Earth Alliance, Amy whispered with sudden hope. The craft circled the area, then began to descend about half a mile ahead of them. Amy wanted to run toward it to signal for rescue, but caution held her back. What if the Drakari had captured human vessels? What if it was a trap? Nira seemed to sense her dilemma. The Makari sniffed the air, her sensitive nose picking up scents beyond human capability. Her kind, she said, pointing. To the craft, Amy decided to take the risk. They moved toward the landing site, keeping to cover when possible. As they got closer, Amy could see the Earth Alliance insignia on the side of the craft, a scout ship designed for reconnaissance. It had landed, in a small clearing, its engines powering down. A figure emerged from the craft wearing the familiar blue uniform of the Earth Alliance. The human looked around cautiously, weapon drawn, Amy recognized her with a surge of joy. "Kelly," she called out, moving into the open. The woman turned, weapon raised, then lowered it in shock. "Amy," she said, disbelief in her voice. The two women embraced Kelly, pulling back to look at her friend. "You look terrible," she said with a smile. Then her eyes widened as she noticed the Makari and cubs behind Amy. I have a lot to explain," Amy said, "but first we need to get these cubs to safety." Kelly nodded, leading them to the craft. It was designed for a crew of 4, but they managed to fit everyone inside. The cubs were fascinated by the human technology touching everything. Until Nira chittered a warning, Kelly powered up the engines, explaining as she worked. The Drakari invasion had hit multiple settlements across the planet. The main research base had been destroyed in the first wave, but some humans had escaped to the mountains where they joined with Makari. Resistance fighters. Earth Alliance has sent a response force, Kelly said, but they're still days away. We have been gathering survivors, running rescue missions, when possible. The small craft rose into the air, Amy feeling relief wash over her as the ground fell away. The cubs pressed against the windows, watching with wonder as they flew over the devastated landscape toward the mountains. The flight took less than an hour. The craft descending into a narrow valley hidden between towering peaks. Kelly landed near the entrance to a cave system. Camouflage netting was quickly pulled over the vessel by waiting humans, and Makari Amy helped the cubs out of the craft. They blinked in the daylight, looking around with curiosity. The mountain air was clean, free from the smoke and ash of the lowlands. Nira chittered with joy as she recognized several Makari adults among those approaching. Her mate was among them, their reunion emotional as the family was brought together again. The 3 orphaned cubs stayed close to Amy, uncertain in the new surroundings. Elra held her hand, refusing to leave her side, even when other Makari approached offering comfort. Amy was led into the cave system along with the cubs. Inside the natural caverns, humans and Makari had established a base of operations equipment. Salvaged from various outposts lined the walls. Communications arrays, power generators, medical facilities. The resistance was well organized. Amy was brought to the medical area where a doctor examined her injured shoulder. The cubs watched the procedure with interest, especially when the doctor used a tissue regenerator to heal the damaged muscles. The pain faded immediately, replaced by a tingling sensation as new tissue formed. A tall human male approached as the doctor finished. Amy recognized him immediately. Commander Diane from the main base. He had been in charge of the research. "Mission to Zeri, we've heard about what you did," he said, his voice gruff but respectful. "Carrying 5 cubs through a war zone in your environmental suit. That took courage." Amy shook her head. "It wasn't courage, just necessity." The commander smiled. "They always say the bravest ones never think they're brave." He looked down at the cubs who had settled around Amy like a protective circle. "We have other orphans here. The Makari are caring for them. I will keep these 3. Amy said firmly. "They trust me. They have already lost everything else." The commander nodded, understanding. "I won't separate you," he promised. Amy was given quarters in one of the side caverns, a small space but private enough for her and the cubs. Food and clean water were provided. The cubs ate hungrily. Then, curled up together, exhausted from their ordeal, Amy sat beside them, watching them sleep. Their silver fur rose and fell with each breath. Their large eyes closed in peaceful slumber. Kelly visited, bringing news. The resistance had been gathering strength. Makari from across the planet were joining with the surviving humans. Earth Alliance reinforcements were less than 2 days away. The Drakari were still searching for survivors, but hadn't discovered the mountain base. The Makari have been amazing, Kelly said. They know these mountains, every cave, every path. The Drakari can't follow us here. Their machines are too big for the narrow passes. Amy listened while stroking Elra's fur gently. The smallest cub had curled up in her lap, refusing to sleep with the others. Her bond with the human was something special, something neither fully understood, but both treasured. What will happen when reinforcements arrive? Amy asked. The Earth Alliance will drive the Drakari back, Kelly explained. They attacked a protected world. The Alliance won't let that stand. Amy nodded, but uncertainty filled her. What would happen to the cubs when this was over? Would they be placed with Makari families? The thought of losing them brought an unexpected pain to her heart, especially Elra. The little one had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The following day brought new developments. The Resistance had captured a Drakari communications device. From it, they learned the invaders were planning a final push to eliminate remaining resistance before Earth Alliance forces arrived. The Drakari had detected energy signatures from the mountains. They suspected the location of the base commander. Diane called a meeting of all adult humans and Makari. The cubs were left in a central cavern under the watch of several caretakers. Amy attended the meeting, her knowledge of the Drakari machines valuable to the planning. We need to evacuate, the commander said. Earth Alliance ships will be here tomorrow, but the Drakari will find us before then. We need to move deeper into the mountains. Makari elder spoke through a translator. No deeper caves, not large enough for all. Many cubs cannot travel fast. Mountains dangerous. Dilemma was clear. Staying meant fighting when the Drakari found them. Leaving meant dangerous travel through treacherous mountain passes with cubs and injured. We fight another Makari, said a warrior with battle scars in his silver fur. Protect cubs. Protect home. The humans exchanged looks. The Makari were peaceful by nature, but the invasion had awakened. Dawn brought the sound of distant explosions. The first traps had been triggered. The Drakari were coming. Amy rushed to prepare the cubs. She had been given a small sidearm for protection, but hoped she would not need to use it. The Resistance fighters moved to their positions, humans and Makari working together. Amy was assigned to the medical area, her job to protect the cubs and help with the injured. The 3 orphaned cubs stayed with her while nearest children remained with their parents. Elra, the smallest cub, refused to leave Amy's side. The little one had appointed herself Amy's helper, organizing medical supplies with surprising efficiency. The other 2 cubs, Sierra and Vela, comforted the younger Makari children, trying to keep them calm. As the sounds of battle grew closer, the first casualties arrived within the hour. Makari warriors with burn wounds from Drakari energy weapons, human fighters with cuts and broken bones. Amy worked alongside the medical team, treating injuries as best they could with limited supplies. The battle continued throughout the morning. The narrow passes slowed the Drakari advance, but did not stop it. The war machines could not navigate the mountain terrain, but the Drakari soldiers were pressing forward on foot. Their armor and weapons still gave them an advantage over the defenders. By midday, the fighting had reached the outer caves. The Resistance falling back to prepared positions, the injured were moved deeper into the cave system. Amy, helping to carry stretchers. The cubs followed, keeping the younger children organized and quiet. Their courage impressed everyone, even the hardened warriors. Commander Diane arrived at the medical area, his uniform scorched from near misses. His face was grim as he reported to the medical team. They have more soldiers than we expected. He said they're pushing us back faster than we planned. Earth Alliance reinforcements are still 8 hours out. Amy felt fear grip her heart. They might not hold out that long. The Drakari were too many, too well armed. The Resistance was fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. What can we do? She asked. The commander looked at her, his expression softening as he noticed the cubs gathered around, her protecting the little ones. The Earth Alliance is sending advanced ships, smaller, faster vessels. They might reach us sooner, but we need to hold this position as long as possible. A tremendous explosion shook the cavern. Dust and small rocks fell. From the ceiling, the Drakari had breached another defense line. They were getting closer. Amy made a decision. I need to get the cubs out of here, she told the commander. There must be deeper caves places. The Drakari won't look. Diane nodded, pointing to a passage at the back of the medical area. That leads to the lower caverns, he said. The Makari know the way. Take as many children as you can. The rest of us will hold them here. Amy gathered the cubs, explaining quickly what they needed to do. Sierra and Vela moved among the other children, organizing them into groups. Elra stayed with Amy, helping to gather medical supplies they might need. A Makari elder approached, offering to guide them through the lower caves. Amy accepted gratefully. The elder knew hidden passages that even the other Makari were unaware of, ancient paths that would keep them safe from the invaders. As they prepared to leave, Kelly arrived carrying a communications device. Earth Alliance, she reported. They need coordinates for extraction. The advanced ships will be here within the hour, but they need to know exactly where to find us. The elder chittered something, the translator converting. We can reach surface through sacred caves, she said. There is a plateau. The ships can land. Kelly gave Amy the communications device, showing her how to send the coordinates once they reach the plateau. Then she hugged her friend tightly. Be safe, she whispered. Amy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She knew Kelly would stay with the defenders, buying time for the children to escape. The sound of fighting was closer now. The Drakari would reach the medical area soon. The elder led them into the passage, Amy following with 20 cubs of various ages. Both human and Makari children had been placed in her care. The 3 orphaned cubs helped keep the group together. Elra holding the hand of the smallest human child, a girl no more than 4 years old. They descended into darkness, the elder producing a bioluminescent plant that cast a soft blue glow. They moved as quickly as possible through twisting passages and narrow tunnels. The sounds of battle faded behind them, replaced by the drip of water and the echo of small feet. The lower caves were ancient, formed by water over millions of years. Crystalline formations caught the blue light, creating a magical atmosphere. Despite the danger, the cubs were quiet, their large eyes reflecting the light as they followed their guide. They had been traveling for nearly an hour when Amy heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps behind them. Heavy armored footsteps. The Drakari had found the passage. Amy urged the children forward, the elder increasing their pace. But some of the smaller cubs were tiring, unable to maintain the speed they needed to hide. The elder pointed to a side passage barely visible in the dim light. We go there, she whispered. Sacred cave Drakari cannot find. They squeezed through the narrow opening, emerging into a large cavern. The ceiling rose high above them, invisible in the darkness. The floor was smooth, polished by the passage of many feet over countless generations. This was a sacred place to the Makari, a sanctuary. The elder led them to the far side, where the wall was carved with ancient symbols. Here we wait, she said, safe. Amy positioned the children against the wall, the smallest in the center, the older ones on the outside. She and the elder took up positions near the entrance, listening for pursuit. The 3 orphaned cubs stayed with the other children, keeping them calm with whispered stories and gentle touches. They waited in tense silence, the minutes stretching into an hour. There was no sign of the Drakari. Perhaps they had lost their trail in the complex cave system. Perhaps the defenders had stopped them. Amy allowed herself to hope. The elder approached, touching Amy's arm gently. We continue now, she said. Ships soon. They gathered the children, preparing to move on. The sacred cave had multiple exits, one leading upward toward the surface. That would be their path. The communications device showed they were close to the coordinates. Kelly had marked as they prepared to leave. A sound echoed through the cavern, a metallic scraping from the entrance. They had used Drakari armor against stone. Amy froze, her hand moving to the sidearm at her hip. The children huddled together, eyes wide with fear. The elder pointed frantically to another exit on the opposite side of the cavern run. She whispered, "Take cubs." Amy hesitated, unwilling to leave the elder behind. But the old Makari pushed her toward the exit. "I delay them," she said firmly. "You save cubs." Understanding dawned. Amy was being given time to escape with the children. The elder would sacrifice herself, drawing the Drakari away from their trail. Amy wanted to refuse, but knew there was no choice. The children had to come first. With a heavy heart, Amy led the children toward the exit. Elra looked back at the elder, her eyes shifting to a sad, blue color, understanding what was happening. The smallest cub chittered something in her native language, a farewell, a thank you. They had just reached the exit when energy weapons fired. The cavern lit up with harsh red light. Amy pushed the children. Through the opening, not looking back, she knew what had happened. The elder had given her life for them. The passage led upward, growing steeper as they climbed. Amy carried two of the smallest cubs, the others helping each other. The three orphaned cubs led the way, their night vision better than the humans, Sierra finding hand and footholds for the others to use. After what felt like hours, they reached another cavern. Smaller than the sacred cave, but with a significant feature. A crack in the ceiling revealing stars. The first glimpse of the sky they had seen since entering the mountain. Amy checked the communications device. They had reached the coordinates. The plateau was just above them. Now they needed to find a way up to the surface. Vela. The middle cub discovered a natural chimney near the wall, a vertical shaft leading upward toward the starlight. It was narrow but passable. The children could climb it, reaching the plateau above. The older children went first, helping to pull up the younger ones. Amy sent the cubs up one by one, keeping count, making sure none were left behind. Elra was last, refusing to go, before Amy was ready. Finally, only Amy and Elra remained. The sounds of pursuit had returned. Drakari soldiers were in the passages. Below, moving closer, Amy lifted the small cub, placing her in the chimney. "You climb," she told Elra. "I follow." The cub hesitated, her large eyes fixed on Amy with concern. Amy smiled reassuringly, giving the little one a gentle push. "Go," she said. Elra began to climb, her clawed feet finding purchase on the rough stone. Amy watched until the cub reached the waiting children above. Then she activated the communications device, sending the signal to the Earth Alliance ships as she prepared to follow the cubs up the chimney. A sound behind her made her turn. An armored Drakari soldier stood in the passage entrance, weapon raised. Amy drew her sidearm but knew she was too late. The Drakari fired. Pain exploded in Amy's side. She stumbled, falling to one knee, but she managed to raise her weapon, firing back. The shot caught the Drakari in a gap in its armor. The invader fell writhing. Amy forced herself to her feet, pressing her hand against the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers. She looked up. At the chimney, Elra's face appeared at the opening above the cub's, eyes shifting to red with fear as she saw Amy's injury. "Go," Amy called up to her. "I come."